Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Conversations, Compassion Under COVID-19. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the Director of Faith-Based and Community Partnerships for the American Red Cross Los Angeles region, Jennifer Johnson.
Welcome to the American Red Cross Los Angeles region's Community Conversations. As John mentioned, I am Jennifer Johnson, and I have the privilege to serve as the Director of Faith-Based and Community Programs for the American Red Cross Los Angeles region. Sorry guys, I had to start my video. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge the pain, fear, frustration, and rage that we are all feeling through this uprising and under this pandemic. Let me also recognize the specific burden of systemic racism and injustice that the Black community has been carrying since our nation's birth and is especially terrible right now. Please know that the Red Cross cares. As a region, we are working on resources to help educate our staff, partners, and volunteers on the inequities that have brought us to where we are today. Your community engagement team, that's the team that I'm on, stands with you. Please let us know if we can be supportive. And thank you everyone for tuning in. It is a gift to have this opportunity with you today. Today's topic is compassion under COVID-19, how we grieve and worship in isolation. Although we welcome our guests to speak freely on what they feel is most important at this moment. Before I introduce our experts, I wanted to share the flow of this webinar. First of all, you will hear a bit from each one of our panelists. Please watch the chat box as we drop resources in there for you. After everyone is presented, we want to hear from you. So please use the chat box also for any of your questions. And of course, if our speakers have a question for another panelist, ask away. This community conversation is for all of us. I want to thank and welcome our speakers. And we're going to go in the order of their presentations. Let me welcome Cantor Dorothy Goldberg. She is the Red Cross Disaster Spiritual Care Lead in the Cascades region. Dorothy also just had a birthday. Currently, she works as a chaplain for Providence Portland Medical Center in Portland. She has a special interest, tenderness, and experience in end-of-life issues and has served as a hospice chaplain. Second up, we'll have Lisa Payne. She is Director of Public Engagement in Mayor Garcetti's office. She is filling in for David Price, who we are lucky to have standing side by side the mayor during this difficult time and working with him. Then next, we'll have Pastor Julian Lowe. Pastor Julian and his wife Christina are the lead pastors of Oasis Church in Los Angeles. That's in Koreatown. If you've never been, they have a beautiful facility, great music. He spends time with his family, hanging out with friends, and helping people know Jesus better. He loves to see other people win, and I think it's pretty cool that he serves as the Los Angeles Clippers chaplain. And then last, who will be sending us off, is Miss Carol Bamesberger. She is the Los Angeles Regional Red Cross Spiritual Care Lead and a very dear friend of mine. So if we can start with you, Cantor Dorothy.
Thank you very much. Welcome from Portland, Oregon. Thank you to Jennifer and the Red Cross for inviting me here to this very important community conversation. My heart is heavy, as I think all of ours are, at what's going on right now, and I just want to express my solidarity with the protesters, the peaceful protesters. I too am outraged. But I'm here today to talk about grief. And as Jennifer said, I am an ordained cantor in the Jewish tradition. I'm also a hospital chaplain, and I have many years' experience as a hospice chaplain. End of life is really my specialty. So I have been with many, many people as I've grieved. And this time of coronavirus has been so exceptional in so many ways and so difficult. In my work in the hospital, I've seen people who are losing a loved one, and they, day in and day out, they have to be with them. Now, normally when I was a hospice chaplain, when someone was dying, there would be friends and family around the bed, vigils held for them overnight. You know, they would take turns to be with the person who was dying. I think all of us, if we were dying, would want to have people around us. What's happening now is in the hospitals, they're only allowing one visitor in at a time. Sometimes closer to death, they'll allow a few more, but basically, not only are they allowing one visitor at a time, it has to be the same visitor. So like you can't have your your husband and then your daughter, just one person. So this is very lonely for the people who are dying and incredibly lonely for the survivors after death. At a time when normally we would be surrounded by people, we would have a funeral, maybe with hundreds of people there, we'd have hugs, we'd have people coming in our houses and bringing food. All of that is impossible. Right now, to have a funeral, you can only have, in many states, up to 8 people around a grave. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes funerals have to be by video. That's incredibly difficult for anyone who's grieving. In my particular tradition, and also in the Muslim tradition, we have a purification ritual for the dead, and we have groups who actually wash bodies when someone dies. Obviously, none of that can be done. So entire rituals that are part of dying are gone right now. In Jewish tradition, we have what's called Shiva, which begins after the funeral, up to 7 days of grieving in our homes, where we kind of leave the door open and people come and go, they bring food, they tell stories about the person who's died. It's a very communal experience. Right now, we can't have Shiva, we can't have funerals. And, for me, I'm also a widow, as Jennifer knows. I lost my husband 2 years ago. He died very quickly from pancreatic cancer. When he died, I had a sister who came up and stayed with me for a week. I went and stayed with another sister for a week or two. I had friends hugging me, bringing food. I was never alone. When I think about what that would be like now I live alone, and it's hard to even see my friends and family. The pain and heartache of that kind of isolation is so intense. And so what I think that we can do as friends and neighbors is, if someone is grieving or if someone is about to lose a loved one, the best thing you can do is be there in any way you can. Video chat with them. You could do a virtual video, on a virtual Shiva on Zoom. I've actually had a few patients do that who weren't even Jewish. They decided to have a virtual Shiva, and a lot of friends and family got online. They told stories about the person. They told the survivors how much they love them and how for them. That is, while not perfect, at least something helpful. You can still drop off food for people. We can't share it anymore, but you can still drop off food for grieving people. You can just call them and say, I'm there with you. You could take a walk at 6 feet and with masks on. Let's not stop helping those who are grieving with their mourning and with being with them. We just have to be more creative about how we're with them and try to understand the deep grief of being alone and isolated at a time like this. It's really important. I have a couple of online resources that you might want to have a look at. Right now, because so many people have lost their jobs, even paying for a funeral is incredibly difficult and expensive. A funeral can cost $10,000 to $12,000. For a cremation, a little bit less, but it's very, very expensive. And in Oregon, I don't know about California, but in Oregon, the tradition, the new sort of trend of home burials is becoming very popular, and it is legal, and there are certain parameters around it. So there is a link to OregonFuneral.org to doing your own home burials and funerals. And there's also a lot of other really excellent information on their website, including COVID-specific information on what goes on with grieving and memorials. So I hope you have a look. There's also some California resources in there. Do have a look. And, I think what I would say was, we can't lose compassion. Even though we are separated from each other, we still need to be compassionate and to love each other in every way that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Cantor Dorothy. And Lisa, if you could ease us into your presentation, please.
Hi. I'm Lisa Payne. I'm the Director of Public Engagement for Mayor Garcetti. That means I oversee a team of 8 area reps who cover the city of Los Angeles. David Price, who should have been here today, is the area rep for the Southwest area of the city. And he's also a youth minister at First AME Church in Los Angeles. He, as you might all guess, is very busy right now, given everything that's happened over the last week. And so I am filling in, and we'll try to do the best I can on this. He's the real expert, but you know, we're all very, our office and the mayor is all very concerned, obviously, about COVID-19, and then now about all the issues that have been, that are underlying all the protests that are going on. So let me start first by thanking you all for being here, and thanking you, the Red Cross, for inviting me to be part of this and the mayor's office to be part of this. My understanding from Jennifer is that a lot of the folks on this webinar are members of the faith community in Los Angeles. And I really want to acknowledge both, well, all the work that you all have done, right? Both the pain that you have taken on, the pain of seeing parishioners who are sick and having to help them through that, as well as the pain that you have seen with parishioners suffering from the economic fallout from the precautions that we've had to take because of COVID-19. I know that's a lot to take on. It's a lot, and we really, the mayor and our office really appreciate all you've done with that. We also really appreciate how you have had to completely change how you operate and do business, and how you provide consolation to your parishioners. And we appreciate the leadership you have shown by converting your services to safe online services, and by providing the counsel and consolation in safe and you know, physically distanced, wearing masks ways. So, and I know that has also been tough. And I know it's been tough, you know, I just want to acknowledge, I know that we also know that it's been very tough because financially for you all. And so I just want to acknowledge that and appreciate all that you have done and all the ways you have stepped up and really on your own stepped up to start food banks and hand out face coverings and other ways to be of assistance and really be a partner with us in helping keep the city safe. So, and our residents safe. So, obviously, well, first I just want to say, I want to give you all some resources. I know before the last week, there were announcements about being able to reopen faith communities in the city and in the county. I know that's not, that presents its own challenges. I also know in South LA, I believe most of the congregations in South LA have chosen to wait before reopening and continuing with the virtual services. We have on our website, and David Price was very involved in putting this together, a guide. It's about 20 pages, and on best practices for how to reopen it. And you can find this at coronavirus.lacity.org/business. I know houses of worship are not a business, but this is where all the guidance for all the different types of businesses and other organizations is. And so this goes everything from health and personal hygiene, how to do cleaning and sanitizing, how to set up physical distancing. So we hope that that can be helpful. I wanted to give you another resource, which is that the Los Angeles Metropolitan churches are helping faith organizations connect with resources for PPE and other equipment that can help you and your congregation stay safe. And then we have a volunteer engagement director here at the mayor's office, who we're getting all set up to try to connect people who may want to volunteer, both with the response to COVID-19 and then, of course, the response to the uprising and the protests that have happened just now. You know, COVID-19 has really also surfaced for us in a really, on its own, in a very real way, the disproportionate impact and the disproportionate environmental factors, right, that have made it, made communities of color, particularly the African-American community, so susceptible to COVID-19. I think you all know and have read about the disparate impact, the much higher rate of death in the African-American community in particular, but all communities of color, and then also within low-income communities and across all age groups within those communities. Obviously, this is because of the types of work that folks in those communities tend to do. They tend to do the essential services work, the work that does require you to be out and interacting with other people. The fact that the housing situation is such and so expensive that they are more crowded together in homes. Hard to have physical distancing there. You know, pollution and tends to be, you know, environmental factors, pollution and other environmental impact factors tend to fall more heavily on low-income communities of color in the city as well as it is across the nation. And of course, the stress that communities of color carry within them, having to deal with racism and the stress of making it work financially day to day. So we know that has been really surfaced and brought to the forefront those issues, and that obviously those issues are behind a lot of the uprising that's going on right now, rightfully so, that people are really protesting those issues, right? And so we have taken a few steps. We need to take more. I think in terms of testing, we have set up additional testing sites, I believe, in South LA, including a walk-in center in South LA. We're trying to work with the county to partner to set up more walk-in centers in lower income communities as well. We have so I believe you guys are probably aware, there's the Kidron Medical Center, which was founded and run by African-American medical professionals, came out of the Watts riot. That's a walk-up center in South LA. We also have drive-in centers, Willowbrook, Inglewood, not in the city, but we but with the county, we've partnered with them to set those up. And then of course, we partnered with them to increase the Crenshaw mall testing site and the tests we can do there. We're also really looking at how to respond in a real way to the issues that people are protesting about right now, both in terms of the police, but also in terms of the underlying economic inequities. And the city council and the mayor are setting up the Civil and Human Rights Commission in January. The purpose of the commission is to advise upon the city's anti-discrimination efforts, make recommendations on city laws pertaining to discrimination, implement anti-discrimination laws adopted by city council, and including promulgating regulations, requesting subpoenas of witnesses or documents, and investigating complaints of discrimination. I am sure, given the events of the last week and a half, there will also be a focus on addressing those issues. Capri Maddox is the executive director. She is currently with the city attorney's office, but has a long history of working in the community and working on issues of racial justice. So with that, I'll leave it at that, except just to say that we want to continue the dialogue about how we can better serve faith communities, how we can better serve low-income communities of color in a very real way in Los Angeles. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And it's so hard, I think, to take all of that information that's really heavy and end on a positive note. So with ending on the Civil Rights Commission, I want to have you back in for you to tell us more, if it's not you, somebody from the mayor's office, to tell us more, because I think that there are a lot of people on this call who would be interested in being a part of that. And thank you, Lisa. You did a great job. By the way, everyone, I talked to her, I want to say maybe 10 minutes before the call started so she could hop on this. So thank you so much for just jumping in and sharing all the information. And I'm really excited to hear from Julian, from Pastor Julian. I had a really tough day, was one of the first conversations I had with him, and just talking to him about what he's doing and sort of how he sees the world really changed my perspective, because I was in a very angry place. And so I'm excited for all of us to get to meet Pastor Julian. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer, and grateful to the American Red Cross for all the work that they have done over the years. And just also wanted to say, before I begin, Dorothy, I'm so deeply sorry for the loss of your husband 2 years ago. And should any needs come up for you specifically, please get my information from Jennifer, and we'd love to serve you any way that we can. This is a very difficult time for our city. It's a very difficult time for our nation. But it's very much when you feel the tremors of an earthquake, it's due to something that is happening deep under the surfaces of the earth, where tectonic plates are shifting. And so the earthquake is a result of something much deeper. And what we're experiencing in this country, and I love Dorothy's talk on grief, we're experiencing deep grief that specifically can be more even compounded in this season for people of color in the African-American community. I remember early January preaching a church service, and an LA hero, Kobe Bryant, and his daughter and 7 other people passed away, and a wave of grief overtook the church. I just want to give you this picture. I was sharing about Jesus, and I could feel a wave of grief hitting me, and I didn't know what it was. And then weeping broke out, and someone just interrupted the service and handed me their phone, and a hero of LA, and a hero to specifically even the African-American community. Obviously, he was a hero everywhere, had passed away. And I'm pastoring people through that. And I cried on the phone with so many different people. And that took about 3 or 4 weeks of navigating and having compassion for all the lives lost. And in the middle of that grief, I am the team chaplain of the LA Clippers. And so I was trying to pastor and walk NBA players through that. In the middle of all that grief, I remember buying a couple extra bottles of hand sanitizer because there was this rumor of a virus that had broken out in China and had come to the city of Seattle. And little did I know that within 1 month, 2 months of Kobe Bryant's death, a global pandemic would hit, and people would lose their jobs. I love the fact that it was brought up that how this has really affected people of color. In some cities, 68% of the COVID-19 deaths were people of color. I talked to a pastor today that pastors on the south side of Chicago and said that 98% of his church is jobless, 98%. And so we are seeing a deep grief. And if that wasn't enough, then here comes literally the sobering reality of where race relations are in our nation. I am affectionately known as Pastor Julian, and this has been a very difficult couple of weeks for me because in the world I live in, I'm celebrated and I'm honored, the church world. Pastor Julian, what a great message. Pastor Julian, you're doing great. But the reality is that I am still an African-American man in America, hearing the stories of the people affected by this. Our church has done everything in our power to partner with families that have lost their jobs and have been affected by COVID-19. We've done everything in our power. We've given away over $100,000 in COVID-19 relief efforts. And I asked for a list of those families who had been affected by COVID-19 so I could be praying for them. And I was saddened to see all the last names: Jimenez, Reyes. The list went on and on. And it was very clear that most of these families were people of color who needed food, who were emailing for grocery cards. And that does not, I do not say that to, divide myself from white people, because I'm a pastor of a congregation that is deeply diverse. We are 22% white, 21% Hispanic. We're 23% Asian, and like 20% Black, and the rest is mixed because they all have babies together. But I'm not saying this to be divisive, but I think that we need to understand that unity begins with division, where we divide ourselves from injustice in order to pursue justice and care and compassion. And here's the thing about compassion is that it says something else is playing over me, but here's the interesting thing about compassion. Is compassion in the Bible means to be moved with. And I think so many times in our country, we can feel bad, but feeling bad is paralyzing. When you don't feel like you know what to do, it is very likely that you're just feeling bad, because feeling bad is paralyzing. When you're overwhelmed with a grief, I just feel so bad that this is happening, or I still feel so bad that people are dying. But true compassion creates a movement of change. And I really believe that we need to come together. I think we cannot just mobilize in tragedy. We have to really understand what's happening with people. We have to remove the ceilings of our compassion. I have had to do this multiple times with people in my church who I love so deeply, who tell me that racism is just a political ploy to gain voters. I've had people tell me that they were deeply hurt. And in all of that, I've even had to have compassion on people that I don't feel have had compassion for me. And so compassion is so key to this conversation, because we need to find the people who need the most compassion. Let me just explain this. We can kind of generalize this as COVID-19, right? We can kind of say, yeah, COVID-19 has hit America. But wait a minute, 40% of the deaths in America were people who were living in assisted homes, in long-term healthcare homes. 40% of those 100,000 deaths were people that were living in healthcare facilities, that already had illnesses, that already were probably alone. And I think that we have to understand, where do I direct my compassion? And what I honestly feel is that a lot of the people of color and older people, we need to make sure that we direct our compassion in the right places. If you actually shoot a shotgun, you can hit a lot of stuff, but not very much effectively. And we got to make sure that we don't have shotgun compassion, but that we aim and target who needs my compassion. Even in the some of the rioting, I do not condone violence in any way whatsoever. But I have seen throughout American history, even those people get compassion. What do I mean? On the pages of history, you'll find that in 1774, a group of white settlers, furious at injustice and oppression from the King of England, they tried to whisper and let their government know and want to be heard. But they were unheard. And so they stormed the harbors of Boston, and they went along the ships, and they dumped deliveries of tea that didn't belong to them in the ocean. And historians say that they caused $1.7 million in damage to the King of England. The King of England called it a riot and an act of war. And so the Revolutionary War began. But across the pages of our history books, as compassion rose to what it meant to be oppressed, they changed the narrative not to a riot, they changed it, and now we know that as the Boston Tea Party. Here's what I'm saying. Compassion sometimes grows in the soil of pain, where maybe what we are calling violence and rioting years from now, 200 years from now, we will be calling these people freedom fighters. Do I condone violence? No, I do not. Hear what I'm saying. But even for the oppressed, we have to have compassion, because as compassion rises, wounds can heal. And I want to challenge all of us to have compassion for the places that we seem that we want to villainize, that we want to victimize. And I really believe we will see change. And so when you think of compassion, we kind of think of someone that we can relate to, right? We think of someone that we understand their pain. I do not understand the pain of a rioter or a looter. I don't understand why someone would bust out of the window of a hardworking business person and ruin their business. I do not understand that. I don't have no evidence in my life on how that could help bring change. But evidence and empathy are never competing emotions. And I think sometimes when we want to know all the facts and we want the evidence, we forget about empathy because we have a lack of evidence. We should never allow evidence and empathy to compete. We need all the facts. We need to educate ourselves. But the entire time, we need empathy and compassion. I really believe that if we do this, we can actually see change in our communities, but it's going to be painful. Here is my final thought. If you want to be effective at compassion, you have to understand that God would like to make you a steward of pain. God would like to make you a steward of pain. We all can believe for dreams and miracles and promises, but in order to be a steward of a promise, you have to be a steward of pain. And most rehabilitation, our nation needs to be rehabbed. Most rehabilitation involves pain. My dad got knee replacement surgery 2 years ago, and the doctors told him that he needed to, in order for his knee to be healed, 3 days after surgery, they needed to bend it at a 90-degree angle. And they said that if he didn't, that he wouldn't be in pain in later years, but he would limp the rest of his life. And so he went to the doctor 3 days after his surgery, and my dad tells the story, they bent his knee, and he said, "Julian, I am 65 years old, and I have never been in this much pain in my life." I shouted at the top of my lungs. Tears streamed down my face, and I was embarrassed at how much pain I was in. And so I turned to the doctor and I said, "How far was that?" And the doctor said, 70 degrees. And he said, I was so discouraged because I was in that much pain but yet I was so far away from where I needed to be. And I think if we're not careful, that's what compassion does. Compassion makes you so deeply aware of pain that it makes you also want to give up when you discover that you have so far to go. And so then my dad says that the doctor bent his knee again, and this time he almost blacked out from the pain. And he asked the doctor, how far was that? And the doctor told him 75 degrees. And in that moment, my dad says, I think I will just limp. And as American people, I think that's where we are in our country. I think racism and COVID-19 and all the deaths bring us to a place of such deep pain that we don't think we can take anymore. We don't think we can handle another phone call. So we say, you know what? We will just limp our way through life because I cannot do it anymore. The story of my father's knee ends with the doctors finally had to put him asleep in order to bend his knee at 90 degrees. And what I want to tell you and I is that we don't have the luxury to be asleep and see change. We have to wake up. We have to endure the pain. And compassion is a beautiful thing where God in his grace and his sovereignty and his love decides that you are worthy to be a steward of pain. I think we forget to read the scriptures where the disciples' backs were beaten. They had oppression on all sides. And they went out celebrating because God had considered them worthy to suffer for him. And I'm not saying in any way that justifies what's going on in our nation, but I really believe it's important if we are faith leaders that we don't even fight for freedom and injustice and compassion for people with those affected by COVID-19 because we are trying to achieve a desired result. But we need to see a prophetic future. My favorite activist and leader is Martin Luther King. And he said that God had taken him to the mountaintop and showed him change. We're in the Red Hills of Georgia, that sons of slave owners and sons of slaves will be holding hands, seated at the table of brotherhood. And I think if we're not careful, we will sit in the valley and protest as opposed to coming down from the mountaintop, having been with God, seeing a prophetic future, and come down to the valley and tell the people what we saw in our time with God. And I want to encourage everyone on this call. I am deeply devastated and heartbroken at the effects of COVID-19 and racism in our nation, but God has shown me that he is for us, that he's with us. He's shown me a day where we will recover, and I fight from that place, not just from a desired result that we would recover, but God's shown me that we will. And I want to encourage you to do the same. Whatever your mountaintop is, whatever your faith is, go with God and ask him to show you what you're fighting for, so that you don't lose hope when it gets painful, because we don't have the luxury to be put to sleep. And so that is what I would like to say to you. And I am available for any one of you that needs anything at all. And thank you so much to Jennifer and American Red Cross for letting me share.
Thank you, Pastor Julian. And I told you guys he was really good. So next, I want to go to Carol Bamesberger, and she is our disaster spiritual care lead in Los Angeles. And we have some great spiritual and mental health resources that are available to you, to your membership. I also want to say we're going to drop a clip or a link to the ABC7 video that Pastor Julian was in. So, and it's really beautiful too. So Carol, could you please do us a huge favor and just talk to us a little bit about what the Red Cross, some of the resources the Red Cross can offer, and then this new national program of the Virtual Family Assistance Center. It's tough to learn all the names.
Very good.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like I could go off by myself right now and sit and bring every word that each of you said that has so touched my heart and my spirit. Wow. Thank you, each of you. Pastor Julian, I want to bring you home. Lisa, I think that you are one of the angels that takes care of our mayor. Thank you for that. And especially, I want to say to my sister chaplain, because we both are very kindred spirits, and I can't wait to know you. And I also have been a hospice chaplain and a hospice nurse, and this isn't my first rodeo. I was on the front line of the AIDS epidemic for 27 years. So I have walked my steps in the footsteps that we're walking in today previously. So let's go at this point. Thank you all very much. So at this point, let's go to the page. Can we put up the website? And I'll go a little bit over that. And as that's getting put up, I want to share a story with you. There was a woman, an African-American woman who was in the hospital in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was there for the Alabama tornadoes. And she and her son had been thrown out of their house into a field, and they were both in a coma at the same hospital. And they had left, they went flying, holding on to each other, and then got separated. And at one point, a team of ICCT, Integrated Condolence Care team, we were with this family in the hospital. She was in a coma, she had a trach, and I went over to her bed, and very quietly, as the family was talking, and they were talking to the nurse and mental health person that was there with the Red Cross, and I went and put my head by her pillow, and I whispered a blessing, which I called a message from your Heavenly Father. And then I got up and we left the room, and as we went to go out the door, this woman I looked at her again, and she looked at me, but she was in a coma. Her eyes were open. I felt she went right into my heart. The next day we went back, and the trach was out, and she was out of the coma. And we spent a lovely visit, and we went to leave. She went, "Wait, wait." And we turned around, and she pointed right at me, and she said, "You forgot to sing my blessing." And the blessing I sang to her, very short. She was a Christian woman, I know that. And so this song is Christian. And the message was, I said to her, "Annie, I have a message from your Heavenly Father." That's what I whispered to her. And then I sang, "Peace, child, I am here with you. Peace, child, you're not alone. Peace, child, I'm here beside you. I'm here to guide you. I am your home. Peace, child." And now if we can put up the American Red Cross Family Assistance Center. Can we put that up? If not, I can go on without it. I can talk about it without it. It's fine. There it is. What a guy. Thank you so much. So this is welcome to the Virtual Family Assistance Center. And for the past, I think, 6 weeks, I always keep saying I'm in Virginia at national headquarters, but I've been in my own apartment. But I have been working on getting this project up and created and out, and it's finally come live. This Virtual Assistance or Family Assistance Center is an integrated condolence care program, and it has a couple big parts to it. And if we can slide that up, thank you. The first part is if you need someone to talk to, and there's a hotline call and also an emergency call line. And then on the other side, that you can get a call to a disaster mental health person, a disaster health services person, or a disaster spiritual care person. What we do with this program is that we have available to people the resources that they need in this part of the program. It is for families who have lost someone from the coronavirus. But in listening to the calls of the people coming in, we are discovering that others are calling who are broken and almost at death's door with fear and anxiety and needing someone to talk to about this situation. And so everyone who calls is welcome and greeted and supported and taken care of by the American Red Cross. Disaster spiritual care provides a couple things. We provide emotional support. We provide spiritual support. We provide resources and connections to people that they might need. And we supply information and support to helping them to plan a funeral, to create a service. Many of these families have never had a chance to say goodbye. For many of them, they don't yet have their loved one back in their hands, in their care. They have no control of this. And they know that many of them, especially in New York, were put into deep mass graves because there was no room to keep these people's bodies until they could be returned. So this is very different grief. The grief that they're serving or they're dealing with right now is so complicated. It is so complicated. And we try and give them that face and space so that they know that there are people here willing to help them to solve these problems. We have links, and you can go down further. As we go down, we come to the national resources that we have. In this, we have information for them, all done with compassion. We have faith-based, or we have information for them in counseling, information on faith-based groups, information on legal information, so that if they're having problems legally, we can help them with that. We can connect them to people that can help them. Financial services. And the last one is veteran services. And if we can go down further. Thank you. We are also now getting resources out on a state level, and we are giving state websites so that they can find out about what do we have in our state? What can we do for our state? Another feature that we're doing for this community is Red Cross training for community caregivers. And this training that we're offering is free for them. And this training is to meet their needs and to help them allay their fears and feel trained and ready to understand more of this. Can we go down further? Thank you. On this, you can see many of our community caregivers and first responders are taking part in this because it's needs that they have too. So this is the Family Assistance Center. It's meeting the needs of people like Annie, who was so afraid, like my partner chaplain in this work, who is African American and who has lost 3 family members. And daily he's out working with this on our team to make it better for other families. This isn't equal. It's not okay. And we need to love and know and support everybody in this epidemic and know that we are one with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. And I am really lucky because I get to talk to Carol weekly. So I always say that she adds sunshine to my life. I'm seeing some stuff come up in the chat box, and you do not need to have any association or a family member with COVID-19 for these resources. These resources are available to everyone all the time. No one will be turned away. And I have some questions for you guys. My email has been blowing up because some of you guys are emailing. And one of the questions is for Miss Lisa Payne. Folks want to know how they can get involved with the Civil Rights Commission. Oh, she's on mute.
Okay. There I am. Okay.
Hi, Lisa.
So currently, there's not a way, but it is going to start in January. And I think stay tuned. There's a 7 or 8 member commission, the executive director. She will have staff as well. So I think we have to stay tuned until then. But I know we will be making a big announcement and making sure people know about it then.
We would love to help you get the word out on that. So I'll keep in touch with you on that.
Fabulous.
To get everybody. And there was a question that came through for Cantor Dorothy. And just because we rely so heavily on our traditions and rituals in joy and in pain, what would you advise people to do in isolation without those rituals? I know you talked about the sitting Shiva virtually, which I think is beautiful. And I know that that also people were doing like Seders by Zoom.
Right.
And
I actually did a congregational Seder by Zoom. I served a congregation in Puerto Rico and did it that way. I think that video conferencing is a really great service, a really great resource for us. It's one I certainly used a lot as I've been living alone. I think that's the best thing. If you're grieving, try to keep in touch with people as best you can. There's always a tendency to kind of curl up in a corner. And for people who are introverts, that may be the best thing. But if, like me, you are an extrovert, the best thing you could do is try to reach out in any way you can. There are also some wonderful yoga and meditation, mindfulness things that you can look up on the internet. But I have to say, I still think I'm old-fashioned that way. The best thing when you're grieving is to have people around you. And so if you can social distance, meet someone in a park at 6 feet on a couple of picnic blankets, I would say try to reach out to your congregation, your church or your synagogue or your mosque, and see how people can help you that way. It's really important not to be alone when you're grieving. And it's a real challenge right now, for sure. I also wanted to comment on what Julian said, Pastor Julian. You talked about how we are there to kind of, I can't remember your exact words, but to be representatives of pain, of suffering. I also really feel, and I've seen this in my own chaplaincy, that we also serve as angels. We're in the city of angels now, or you are. I think that each one of us has the capacity to bring great love and comfort to other people, and not even necessarily people we know. I think if we think of ourselves as angels, we are the angels on earth, we are God's representatives. I think we can do our best work and be our best selves. So that's something we can also use for this time of upheaval. Always channel our best selves and be there for each other as angels. Thanks.
You're welcome. And we have a question too, and I can pull up this, or I can even have, since you're on, Dorothy, I could have you answer it. Is that the question came in, will disaster cycle services and the American Red Cross, will we stay neutral or will it be Christian or God focused?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question.
Me too, actually. It gives us a chance to kind of show off.
Yes, that is a great question. As a Jewish chaplain, one of my greatest concerns about joining any organization, but even the Red Cross, was, We don't want proselytizing. When people are suffering, they don't need someone telling them what to think, what to pray, how to believe. And the wonderful thing, exactly, I saw you put up, the Red Cross makes no discrimination. And I want to say that not only do we not make discrimination, but becoming a disaster spiritual caregiver is very difficult in the Red Cross. You have to be professionally trained as a chaplain or recognized in your own denomination and trained in counseling or chaplaincy. We have to have special training in interfaith work so that we can work with absolutely anybody without any kind of backgrounds. I have people in my group here in Oregon from all kinds of religious backgrounds, some of which are evangelical. And they know that when they're with the Red Cross, they're an interfaith chaplain. They're not proselytizing. They're just working with spiritual needs. And spiritual needs aren't always, in fact, often aren't even religious. A lot of times the questions are like, why did this happen to me? Where do I go from here? So a lot of what we do as spiritual care people is not religious. It's just working with you on the big questions of life. That's what we're trained to do. We are carefully vetted and trained to do this work.
Thank you, Cantor Dorothy. And not just, because I think we always think about not discrimination between faiths, but also it could be a person that does not have a faith. And the Red Cross is compassionate to that as well. So I do not think, let me see. Erica Scheller, hello, thank you. You've been asking some great questions. Yes, so I serve as the Director of Faith-Based and Community Programs. And although we offer this program up to community members and faith members, our target audience who we really work with are community leaders, faith leaders, and then also what we call faith and community influencers. It's sort of like the new thing with social media. So we tried to provide the information for that demographic, but also to make it available to everybody else. Because I think the message of what's happening in the faith world, I always feel like faith leaders have a really good hand on the pulse of what's happening in their communities. And so thank you, Erica, for that question. And I'll put my email in the chat for you guys. I'll put our Red Cross faith-based email in there. And if you guys have any questions or you need any help being pointed to any resources, please reach out to us. And if Carol, I just want to say our thanks, and then if I can go back to you, because we're a little bit over, to then take us out with a few sort of, I guess, words to send us out on our day. But I wanted to say thank you to Kendall Dunlap Corsinus, who is my partner on Community Conversations. These community conversations were created and are created to provide faith and community leaders and influencers like yourself with resources and informations that not only bring us together for our shared good, but also help us build resiliency in the communities that we love so much. Thank you to John Axel, who is our webinar's producer, and the whole communications team for making this webinar possible. And thank you to Cantor Dorothy, to Lisa Payne, to Pastor Julian, and to Chaplain Carol. It was an honor to be with you for this moment. We hope you'll join us at the end of the month. We will be celebrating Pride Month with a very brief sensitivity training dedicating to better understanding and standing with our LGBTQ neighbors. And because we want to show compassion and understanding, and this is a great way to learn. So thank you so much. And Carol, if I can kick it over to you to take us out for our day. Thanks.
You will. There you go. All right, everybody. I have a blessing of sorts. It's a song that came to me, or that I wrote right after the Trade Center. And I think if you can just hear the words and know that if we could all do this right now, we would be able to get through this much easier. So I now give you each one, reach one. Each one, reach one, show them you care. Each one, reach one, whisper a prayer. Each one, reach one, you're not alone. Each one, reach one, no need to hide. Each one, reach one, hold out your hand. Each one, reach one, together stand. Each one, reach one, wipe off their tears. Each one, reach one, allay their fears. Let us bring peace, let us bring love, gathering blessings from up above, up above. Each one, reach one, know they are there. Each one, reach one, wisdom with care. Each one, reach one, you're not alone. Each one, reach one, welcome them home. Each one, reach one, hear what they say. Each one, reach one, don't run away. Each one, reach one, hear them in love. Each one, reach one, sign of the love. Stand from above. Bless you. Thank you. And I'm so glad we had this time.